Welcome to Geek Philosophy, where we love geeky wisdom. You have reached episode 5 of the Relics of the Ancients campaign behind the screens videos. If you're one of my players, stop watching. If you're everybody else, let's go. I actually used the Lazy DM worksheet from Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. If you have not read that book or you don't own that book and you're a Dungeon Master, you should. It's a great resource. It really simplifies things and puts it into perspective what are the most important things that you need to get ready for a session. I still like my encounter and encounter response methodology to go throughout, but that only really works if you have a good idea of what the major scenes are going to be. It was a little different this time, and you'll see as we go through. But for his method, it's really simplified into who are the characters, what's the strong start, how are you starting out, and then I really like that he uses the term scenes, very much how I was inspired by scene writing and how I did the encounter writing perspective. So I like this a lot. And then also understanding what are the secrets or clues they might uncover, what are the fantastic locations they might discover, NPCs they may meet, the monsters they may face, and the magic items they might acquire. So this is really contingent on how things happen during the game, and you could run this in a very linear format. There's nothing wrong with linear adventures. That's not the same as railroading, contrary to some popular belief. I think that linear stories are fine. It's when you force the players to make certain decisions to get through a linear story that it becomes railroading. So we don't like that, but we do like how stories develop, and they have a beginning and a middle and an end, and those can change as the game develops, but nothing wrong with having a solid plotline. Having said all that, I had no idea where they were going to go, so I sent out some emails to kind of get the feelers out there for what I thought they were going to do or what they thought they were going to do, but it didn't help me too much, so we were really at the mercy of the players this time around. Now, I was prepared, and I had an idea of what some of those scenes might be, so I'll walk you through it. So I wrote up the introduction just like I normally do. I also want to point out that if you're doing an introduction, you can do it word for word and read it to your players, or you can just do the highlight reel. But another thing that a session introduction does for your players is it reinforces some of the great choices and great role-playing and great decisions that they make. So highlight those. Here, as an example, Henrik used his arcane skills to cunningly invade the conflict and was joined by Riva to overlook the more disturbing details that unfolded. So you're not just saying, okay, well, he did Misty Step to the top of the roof and then this is what happened. You're kind of giving him some props for being able to make that decision and letting the players know that their choices were awesome and it made the story awesome. So don't forget to add that in where you can, especially if you have this exposition right at the beginning. Make sure you mention it. I think it's a good way to pull it together. All right, so they had a bunch of options, like I mentioned before. One of the big ones that I knew they may do, and I think could have been a really strong possibility for this entire session, was traveling to Ventia. And they needed to get back to Spiros Alexandrin, who was the original NPC that kind of sent them on the quest. So there were a few different ways that could happen, and really it depended on resources and time. From a time perspective, the fastest way was magical transport. There are some locations around the campaign world that have magical circles that were available for teleportation. And so these circles are available for a fee, and so this was probably the most expensive way, but also the fastest way. It was instant to travel. Then the next most expensive thing was an airship. Not cheap, but it would have got them there in 2.5 days rather than the 30 days or 35 days booking transport on a coach cab or getting their own horses. The flexibility they would have gained, though, going with the Starlight Roadway would have meant that they could venture off of the path if they needed to, make some shortcuts and things like that. So they could have acquired some horses, some Gedecan rams. My campaign world's version of a large bighorn ram that is used to travel through the mountains. They're a little slower on the straightaways, but much faster going through the mountains because they're much more sure-footed there. So, or sure-hooved? I don't know. But this is kind of one of the choices they could have had, and that could have sparked some other random encounters along the way, depending on how that went. I'm going to come back to this. This is the option that they actually went with, but we'll come back to that. I'm going to scroll down to another option that they almost went with, and I actually thought this was going to be the one that they did. Activate the obelisk and transport back. So they saw the Shadow Seekers do it, so there would have been some checks that they would have had to make, some investigation, some arcana checks to figure out what method they might have used. But without having the specific key phrase, they would have had to roll on this chart again to figure out what random location they went to. It's possible, though, that they rolled a 4 on a d4, and that's where they got. So this could have happened, and it may still happen. I'm going to keep this because if they go back to Grand Ridge, then this may be an option for them to try again. This Spear Point Tower side quest is not the right word for it, because it is definitely linked in with the main story. This option was really something that I wanted to throw in to give them a little bit more interaction with some of the NPCs in Grand Ridge, a little bit more interaction with the owner of the casino and the mayor of Grand Ridge, and then overhearing the message that was brought by one of the main Order of the Freelance contacts, which is, in my world, is the Order of the Freelance is sort of like, okay, you're not a member of any other organization, but you still want to adventure. Well, there is a license for that. And so you're sort of a freelance agent that you can go out and do all kinds of investigations and adventuring and things like that because you are licensed to do so. I put some notes about the description of the character, the voice or personality. We had some fun with Bryce Shipwright's personality and sort of being a jerk to the other two NPCs there. And then I had a highlight of discussion points. At the end of the day, you guys would have picked this up after watching. It was just giving them the plot hook of something else mysterious and arcane is happening. It's causing some issues in a nearby town, and some people went missing. The ones that went missing were some freelance members of a adventuring group called the Alehounds, and one of them was the son of the tavern owner, which Cherdik was sort of the butt of some jokes made by Bryce, but it was anyway, this group is the one that's missing, so they went to go investigate. How did I pull this off in the short time frame? Whether I consider pulling it off, I don't know. Hopefully I did. It did feel a little rushed. We only have 2 hours for playtime. We'll have to revisit that to see if we might be able to do more moving forward or with other campaigns, but it is a lot to fit into 2 hours, so I need to be a little bit better about how I'm pacing things. But as you can see here, I did not make this entire map, and you'll see that I didn't even write anything down here, because what I did when they got there was I pulled up a third-party published adventure. And this one, like I mentioned up above when we were talking about, let me scroll back up, when we were talking about this plan from Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. Again, get that book. He also has a series of adventures that he's put together. Oops, excuse me. And there's actually, I think, a deal that he's got going on, like a bundle. I'll if I find it, I'll link it in the description. And it's great. It's definitely worth it. And one of the things that he has is an adventure called The Call of Starsong Tower. What I decided to do was make some changes to this on the fly. I read through everything. I knew what was going on in that adventure. But being able to leverage an existing published adventure is a key thing that you can do if you have them available. And again, these days, things are so much easier. Like, PDFs are awesome. So I almost prefer having a PDF version of adventures rather than the hard copy in some cases. Hard copy is great, as you might be able to see behind me. I love my books, but but having these things it's so much easier to be able to pull up a PDF and run an adventure right there. And on the fly, because I was using Owlbear Rodeo, I was able to pull the map file in during our break. We had a 10-minute break. I was able to pull that map file in and get it ready to go, drop a couple icons in there, and have an adventure ready to go. So I think the tools now are such that you can really do things very quickly and be pretty agile with how you run the game. So we'll see how it goes. There are also some notes here that didn't pop up yet, but they will in the next session because we didn't finish. So I'm really looking forward to how that plays out and where we're going from here. Again, I appreciate you guys sticking with me as we go through with these adventures and these behind the screens looks, and I hope it's interesting to you. I hope you find it useful for your own planning and knowing that it's not hard, it's not rocket science. You can figure out what to do on the fly when you need to, but you can plan for eventualities as well. So there's so much out there in the form of resources now that there's really no worry involved now. The only worry is everybody having fun, and as long as people are, that's great. And since I'm getting text messages in the middle of the night asking questions about characters and wondering what's going to happen next, then I feel like they're having fun, and that's the main goal, right? So thanks again, and we'll catch you next time, and keep on rolling.